Well, good evening all. This is my most recent installment of Model Railroading on a Budget. And tonight I'm going to put a decoder, it's a Digitrax DH123 decoder, into this Athearn Blue Box SD45. I acquired the locomotive on eBay. It was in a group with another steam engine and a couple of other cars, and really this is the only item I wanted out of that auction, so I was able to luckily resell the other items that I purchased. But anyway, just kind of wanted to give you a not slight, but fast tutorial on installing a decoder in one of these engines. There is a decoder that Digitrax makes that is specially for installation in Athearn Blue Box locomotives. It already has the contacts, the motor contacts and light contacts and so forth that you need already soldered onto the onto the decoder itself. I don't have one of those, so I'm going to solder my own connections, and as I go through, I will. I'm not going to have the video running the whole time, but as I complete a step, I'll come back and I'll show you how that step is done, and basically how to do this yourself. It's not hard, you just have to know what wires go to what contacts inside the engine. So let me get the engine shell off, and I will start with the installation. Alright, so I've got the shell removed, and you can see that this locomotive was previously modified by the owner. It looks like he's gone ahead and soldered some connections here. So I'm going to have to remove those, obviously. This is obviously wired for DC. I need to disconnect those, and so I can remove this metal piece here that bridges the motor and makes contact with the front and rear trucks. That piece has to come out. So that's going to be the first step. I'm going to go ahead and desolder the connections here at the ends of each wire, and then I'm going to remove this tab here, take it out. Alright, so I've got those connections loose here, and the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and remove this harness from here. So I'm going to try and do this one-handed. Basically it just slides out from under the contacts there. That was the back edge, and the front edge slides out, and so there's the tab. We'll set that aside, we won't need that any longer. And the next step is to go ahead and take off the motor from the chassis itself. So in order to do that, what you have to do underneath the Athearn engines, the motor actually sits on 4 white plastic pegs that are inside these holes here. I don't know if you can see that very well, but anyway, what I use to get those out and to not damage them is just the end of a paintbrush, a small little paintbrush, and you can stick this in here and you can push those white plastic engine mounts out without damaging them. So that's going to be my next step. I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll show you the process after that. Alright, so I've got the motor out of the chassis, and you can see the 2 little plastic motor mounts here. One of them I was able to get out, and I didn't want to force the other one loose, and I was able to just slide the engine out, or I'm sorry, the motor out from that one. You can see right here on the bottom of the motor where it slides into those white tabs. So the next step, on the bottom of the engine, or on the bottom of the motor, there are these 2 tabs that protrude down, and they make contact with the frame. So for DC operation, that's what you want, but DCC, you don't want that. So I'm going to have to go ahead and clip those tabs off of there so I can electrically isolate the motor from the frame. And also you can see down there at the bottom of the frame there's actually a strip of metal I'm going to try and remove that, and then if I can't get that out, what I'll do is put a piece of electrical tape down there to make sure that the motor is completely isolated from the frame. Alright, so I've got those tabs removed here off of the bottom of the motor, and the next thing to do is the gray lead from the decoder has to be soldered to this bracket, this copper contact here on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is remove this contact from the bottom of the motor, because I don't want to solder it in place. There's a good chance I could melt the plastic motor mounts there. So when you do this, you have to be really careful. When you take the edge of the clip off from the motor here, there is a spring which holds the brush in place. So you want to be careful to slowly remove this bracket so that the spring doesn't come flying out and go scattering across the floor somewhere. So I'll do that and show you how to go ahead and solder that gray lead to this contact. Alright, so now I've got the contact is off of the bottom of the motor, and how that's done is you just simply take a flat bladed screwdriver and slip it under the end of the copper contact here and just pry it up over the edge of the motor. But you can see that spring sitting in there, and if you're not careful about removing this, the spring will come shooting out there, and then you'll spend the rest of the evening trying to find it. So anyway, that's the critical piece, is getting this off. I'm going to now go ahead and solder the gray lead to my contact here. And what I normally do, especially on these older engines, sometimes there's a little bit of corrosion on the copper itself. So I like to take a wire brush and my little Dremel tool over here and kind of clean up the area where I'm going to solder that contact or that wire onto the contact. And also I'm going to go ahead and tin a spot on the contact itself, and then also the end of the wire, I'll go ahead and tin that as well. Tinning is merely placing a small amount of solder on the contact and on the end of the wire first, and then when you're ready to attach the two, you simply heat the area that you've tinned, and it will go ahead and melt and then attach itself to the wire. So that's the next step. Okay, so try and zoom in here. My close-up is not sometimes very good on this camera, but you can see I've got the contact itself is tinned, and I'm going to go ahead and strip the end of the lead off of the gray wire here, and I'm going to then I don't know if I filmed that. I'm going to take the gray wire and I'm going to strip the end, I'm going to tin that, and then attach it to the bracket. Alright, so there you can see the gray lead is attached to the bottom motor contact, and once that's done I can go ahead and reattach it to the motor, and also I need to remember to go ahead and isolate the motor from the frame. So that's going to be my next step, and I will show you how that's done. Alright, so I've got the bracket reattached to the bottom of the motor, and my next step is going to be to, as I said, go ahead and isolate the frame. So I will do that and show you what that looks like. Alright, so I've got a piece of electrical tape attached to the frame there, so I want to make sure that I completely electrically isolate the motor from the frame, because that's the quickest way to short out with DCC here. So I've got the black tape on there. I'm going to go ahead and reinsert the motor back into the frame, and then what we'll do after that is on the top bracket here, I need to attach the orange wire to the top. So I'll go ahead and take my Dremel tool, I'll clean up the front edge of this contact here on the motor. I'll go ahead and tin it, and I will attach the orange wire here. Alright, so I've gone ahead and tinned all of the attachment points here so as not to bore you with looking at little blobs of solder. There are three, actually five attachment points here that we have to take care of next. Here on the top of the engine, on top of the motor is where the orange wire attaches. Then after that I will have to attach the red and black leads. The black lead attaches to the front here, where you can see I've got that piece of solder sitting on the front. The white lead goes to the back of the light mount, the light contact here, and the red wire is actually going to bridge between this contact and this contact. So I'll go ahead and get all that soldered up and show you how that looks. Okay, so the red wire is a little bit tricky because it's got to be soldered to both the front and the back contacts, and you can see I've got it soldered here to the front contact. There's the orange wire in place on the top. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to measure the distance that I need between the front and back, and I'm going to actually snip the wire here and solder it between the two, and then come back in and solder the remaining edge to that contact. I could try and strip some of the wire right in the middle, but sometimes that's not the easiest thing to do. So I'm going to do that next, and I will show you how that looks. Alright, so I've got my red wire in place, soldered to the front and back pickup. The next step is to take the black wire and solder it to the front of the light mount, right up on the front here. So that's going to be my next step. And then once I finish that, I'm going to solder the white wire to the contact for the back of the light. So I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. Alright, so finally got all of the soldering finished here. So basically what you've got is you've got the black wire attached to the front contact. The red wire is attached to the other contacts. Basically it's the right and left side of the trucks. The red wire is attached to the right side, or the engineer side, I guess, if you want to call it that. And the black wire gets attached to the fireman's side. The white wire is connected to the rear bracket on the light bulb, the gray wire to the bottom of the motor, and the orange wire to the top of the motor. Once you have that finished, I mean that's all you need to run the engine. There are 4 wires left over. The yellow and blue would be used if you had a rear light in the engine, and you can solder those contacts directly to the bulb itself. Purple and green are not used with the Digitrax DH123 and the Athearn engine. I'm assuming that maybe those could be for ditch lights or some other types of controls, but with this decoder they're not used. So one thing I forgot to mention was I had the decoder disconnected from the harness the whole time. It's recommended that you do that just so you don't get any surges of heat or something back into the decoder as you're soldering it. Especially the shorter red wire here, there's a chance it could heat up enough that you could damage the electronics in the decoder. So what I'm going to do now is attach the decoder. I'm going to leave those 4 wires that I didn't use on there just in case I might want to use this decoder in another engine at some point in the future. But I'm going to go ahead and get it all cleaned up here and taped in place on top of the motor. So once I have that finished, I will come back. There's a problem. Okay, so it looks like if I run this backwards on the inside track, when it came to the tunnel portal there, the back handrail right here hit the inside of that tunnel portal. So it looks like I've got a couple of options. I could file that down, the tunnel portal. I may try that first, or I was actually thinking of maybe getting just a single entrance here for both ends of this tunnel here. So I may do that, but anyway, I'm going to put this back on the track here and run it around a little bit, loosen it up, maybe add some lubrication to it. But anyway, there's a decoder install in an Athearn Blue Box. So appreciate your watching. As always, your comments are welcome. I'm not an expert by any means at installing these things, so some of my methods, some of the results may look a little sloppy, but it works. So I'm happy about it, and hopefully I'll be back soon with another video. Take care. Thanks for watching. Please comment.